Alright, so Burke's, the reading on Burke, he uh, he also argues this whole idea about symbols, as Mead did, and but he takes a different approach to laying out what he calls the five clauses or five arguments in the definition of man, just the title of his reading. And so the first clause he talks about is the symbol using animals. So we are not only symbol using human beings, but we are also symbol making or symbol creating human beings. And so that's a very important aspect that he emphasizes, that the difference between us and other objects or animals is that we are not only using symbols, but we are also creating them. That's the first clause. The second one, he talks about the negative, this idea of the negative. And in the beginning of that section of the reading, it says the inventor of the negative, talking about human being, talking about man. And Burke twists that a little bit and kind of inverts the statement to being that the negative invented man, meaning that the human symbol system that we use creates this negative. So the negative is a product of our symbol system. And an example of that is the commandment. And that symbol system of the commandment gives rise to and create this negative idea. So, for example, the commandments, how we have thou shalt not kill, for example, we have the negative idea or negation of that statement, as well as the idea of the killing. We have, or what he calls the quasi-positive of that statement. And so we have these two things as part of that statement, or these two ideas. However, we understand the idea of that statement through that negation. So thou shalt not kill, we get the idea that, okay, that we shouldn't kill. And so that's an example of that, of the negative. That's the second one. Now the third one, he talks about us human beings as being a tool using animal. And one of those main tools that we use is language and our symbols. And so it's one of the fundamental things that separate us from what he describes as the natural condition. Going back to one of Hegel's theories, is that the man has this innate need to create tools and things to accomplish certain things. And so one of those tools is language that we use to communicate, to make sense of what's around us, and to operate in symbol systems. So that's the third one. So the fourth one, he talks about hierarchy, and that we are, well, as he phrases it, is that we are goaded by the spirit of hierarchy. And that has to do with this whole idea of how we are moved by a sense of order, how we tend to adhere to a certain kind of order. And that's another distinguishing factor of man, of the definition of man, of how human beings are unique, as opposed to other objects and animals. The fifth clause or argument, he talks about as a human or man being a political animal or cultural bearing animal. And he uses this idea of perfection to kind of describe that, and to illustrate this point of being this cultural bearing animal, is how we are always striving to just kind of perfection of things. And what's interesting about that is that while we're striving toward this perfection, we're never reaching it, because there's this ongoing process of what perfection is and how we are accomplishing it. So it goes back to Hegel's idea of the dialectic of self-consciousness, and how while we're striving toward this perfection of knowledge, of the world of man in this context that we are never really getting there. And so Burke again kind of twist that perfection idea and makes it a paradox of he describes us as being rotten with perfection, you know, kind of corrupted with this idea of perfection and how we should be and achieve. And so those are the 5 clauses that he talks about of how we define man and how we can come to define man within those different arguments. And then he ties it all together by saying that all of these things are, the premise for these things have to do with emotion and action. And that it kind of goes back to Mead of the stimuli and response. Motion and action having to do with how we are using symbols all the time, how we are operating in these highly complex symbol systems, in contrast to objects and animals that don't do that, that don't operate in highly complex symbol systems. So that's what Burke talks about, and he very much is following that same plane as Mead of symbols and how we're using symbols and how we're creating them and how we are coming to define ourselves according to those symbols. And that's what Burke talks about, and it's all good. Thank you.